same as that of an encyclopedia. They emerged at the same time in history, 18th century, and they have both for their ambition to bring within reach of common individuals, curious individuals, all the world's knowledge. That's what an encyclopedia promises to do from A through Z. Encyclopedic Museum promises to bring under its roof representative examples of all the world's cultures so that many stories can be told and can be told by individuals who come to the museum, as individuals who come to an encyclopedia, to find knowledge that makes sense to them, that then is challenged by their greater curiosity as they pursue their self-education in the museum. It's an empowerment of the individual, which is something that we hold to be so important in the West, and it's a contribution made by the Encyclopedic Museum as it was made by other Enlightenment institutions in the middle of the 18th century. I'm going to start out by telling you a little bit. I'm going to frame it in the context of the Getty Trust. After all, that's my home base. And J. Paul Getty, who is the benefactor, we're the beneficiaries, but he's the benefactor of the trust itself, once said that, in my opinion, an individual without any love of the arts cannot be considered completely civilized. The Getty's commitment to a civil society is front and center in our mission statement, which says, in part, that the Getty is committed to the presentation, preservation, and dissemination of new knowledge about the world's artistic legacy, with the conviction that a greater and more profound sensitivity to and knowledge of the visual arts and their many histories is crucial to the promotion of a vital and civil society. Now, in the era of the Enlightenment, which we think to be the 18th century, let's just frame it that way, in the era of the Enlightenment, the term civil was applied to society as distinguished from the state or the political realm. So distinguished civil from the state or the political realm. In this, it referred to the Roman law idea of civitas or civitas, or the idea of voluntary relations among persons, emphasis on voluntary relations among persons, that was thus neither narrowly familial nor formally constituted by the state. It was outside the state. It was something that individuals took upon themselves as they sought to build a community independent of political affiliation. Emphasis here was on voluntary. Individuals coming together outside of formal bonds policed by the state or later by the church. A distinct sphere of human activity, civil society, was the product of individuals gathering together, physically, or even today as we saw downstairs with people in the library before computer terminals, or virtually, to address each other openly in coffeehouse conversations and debates and in the rapidly rising print media of newspapers and journals. Substantiated by developing social contract and natural law theories, this led to the legitimacy of the radical idea that society preceded government. Government was necessary as society got more complex. But society, as a coming together of individuals in pursuit of a common good, was the idea that preceded government, that it was self-organizing, and that the legitimacy of government depended on its serving the needs of the people. Civil society held politics accountable. The mayor knows a lot about that, I'm sure. Public art museums date from this very period, middle of the 18th century. The British Museum, for example, was founded in 1753, the result of a bequest to the nation, importantly to the nation, citizens of the nation, and not to the crown. And it was governed by trustees. Trustees for the benefit not only, as the terms of the will of the initial benefaction put it, not only for the inspection and entertainment of the learned and the curious, but for the general use and benefit of the public, for any and all, to make their way into the museum, to confront and engage its collections, to wrestle truths from that experience, to test those truths against reality in the pursuit of new knowledge. It was a secular, disputatious space where facts about the world, then, at that time, all manner of natural and artificial things, but now, if you've been to the British Museum, you'll know, with the disciplinary division between art and natural history, all kinds of works of art, could be subjected to rigorous scientific analysis with the promise that this would produce truths about the world which themselves would be subject to analyses, constantly refined, discarded, or confirmed. The authority to critique things and the resulting truths from that critique was not limited to specialists, but importantly was available to everyone whose intelligence could be cultivated by access to clearly articulated and arguable philosophical positions. Now, they didn't mean by philosophical positions what we might think of as today as kind of disciplined, specialized knowledge that only a few people could have access to. They just meant the natural workings out of the rational mind. All of us have access to that rational mind. In pursuit of that rational mind was the pursuit of philosophy as articulated at the time. And this was a cardinal principle of the Enlightenment, that is clear thinking, plain words, candor, and modesty, shared among a commonwealth of polite letters, a community of individuals across political borders, united by a common curiosity about the world. Now, I have written about the importance of encyclopedic museums as cosmopolitan institutions dedicated to the proposition that by gathering and presenting representative examples of the world's diverse artistic cultures under one roof, or like the encyclopedia, between two covers of a single book, they work to dissipate ignorance and superstition about the world and promote tolerance of difference as a means, as a condition of the world, encouraging identification with others as a shared sense of being human, of having in every meaningful way a common history with a common future at stake. In this, encyclopedic museums are crucial to the formation of a civil society and the promotion of a common good. And in the age in which we live, when resurgent nationalism, sectarian violence, and military-backed hardened ideological conflict prosper unabated across the world, and we've seen it very recently in the papers, encyclopedic museums matter now more than ever. Increasingly, encyclopedic museums are being criticized as instruments of the state and of empire, sites of symbolic transactions that confirm the power of the state and the hegemony of the elite over the will of the individual. I argue just the opposite. I argue that by presenting the artifacts of one time and culture next to those of other times and cultures, without privilege or prejudice, encyclopedic museums are dedicated to the dissemination of learning as a force for understanding, tolerance, and the dissipation of ignorance and superstition, and they are arguments against an essentialized state-derived cultural identity in favor of a cosmopolitan one that acknowledges and demonstrates the truth about art, that has never known political boundaries, but has always been dynamic and hybrid, formed through contact and exchange with diverse peoples. Now, in the globalized, polyglot, multi-ethnic world in which we daily confront our many differences, understanding and tolerance of difference is foundational to any notion of civility. And civility is essential to resolving differences in our world, personal or political, local or international. One need only Google the term to find sites for civility in public discourse, the National Civility Center, the Civility Project, the Institute for Civility in Government, and hundreds more. And with the campaign for the US presidency, as already mentioned by the mayor, in full swing, calls for civility and acts of incivility are common currency. But not just here, everywhere. The collapse of empires and the rise of globalism have brought different people into contact with one another in unprecedented numbers, both within and across our national borders. Some 40 million foreign workers, 20 million refugees, and 20 to 25 million internally displaced persons. Those are the numbers of people moving across borders currently. It is unprecedented. This has strained the nation state and changed the way we think of nations. No longer as politically defined and territorially circumscribed, but as discursive fields of cultural signification. It's often said that nations and the whole idea of nation is in tension right now and in dispute because the typical formation of a nation around a group of people identified with each other by virtue of ethnic background or by language, because people are moving, this is an unstable definition. It's one of constant negotiation and renegotiation. This has strained the nation state and changed the way we think of nations, no longer as politically defined and territorially circumscribed, but as discursive fields of cultural signification. As I said, it has led the Indian-born, New York-based social theorist Arjun Appadurai to argue that the principles and procedures of the modern nation state, in his words, the idea of a sovereign and stable territory, the idea of a containable and countable population, the idea of a reliable census, and the idea of stable and transparent categories have come so unglued in our era that they have produced new incentives for cultural purification as more nations lose the illusion of national economic sovereignty or well-being. The result, he claims, is a dangerous, often violent narcissism of our minor differences, finding ways to eliminate that narcissism, that concentration on minor differences, to build a common understanding of where we are alike rather than what separates us. The map of the world, the late cultural critic Edward Said once wrote, has no divinely or dogmatically sanctioned spaces, essences, or privileges. However, we can speak of secular space, he said, and of humanly constructed and interdependent histories that are fundamentally knowable. Such a space and such histories are reliably only created by individuals in civil discourse with one another. The only alternatives to that are tyranny and chaos. When I wrote my most recent book about the Encyclopedic Museum, I was the director of the Art Institute of Chicago, as mentioned, which in all modesty I think is one of the world's great encyclopedic museums and one of the world's great cities. Since then I've become president and CEO of the J. Paul Getty Trust, which comprises not only a museum, but a Getty Conservation Institute, the Getty Research Institute, and the Getty Foundation. Through its many exhibitions, conservation research, and grant-making projects, the Getty has a truly global reach, advancing research, conservation, and presentation of the visual arts and cultural heritage in Los Angeles and on 7 continents, from the dawn of time until the present day. The Getty has consulted on the preservation of traces of hominids in Tanzania 3.7 million years ago. It's helped conserve and exhibit ancient icons from the Sinai and saved the archives and rewritten the history of post-war Los Angeles artists, and it's currently at work preserving Roman mosaics throughout the eastern Mediterranean basin and in Egypt in King Tut's tomb. We are leading the research into the conservation of modern materials and contemporary art, and in cutting-edge lighting strategies for museums to reduce the damage done to artworks by exposure to excessive levels of light. We're making grants to strengthen the museum infrastructure in Africa, to develop museum leadership all over the world, to connect art histories and digitize collections and research materials, and to make them universally available. And in doing so, we are pursuing our primary mission, that is to support the visual arts and the promotion of a vital, and as I said earlier, civil society, not only by preserving and promoting the visual arts, but by partnering with individuals across political borders and building capacity among museum, academic, and conservation professionals. Closer to home, the Getty is using the visual arts to promote civility within Los Angeles' schools. The U.S. Department of Education recently announced a finding from a study on arts education in public elementary and secondary schools that nearly 4 million students receive no specific instruction in the visual arts. This report has also found that the nation's poorest students, the ones who could benefit the most from arts education, are receiving it the least. A new NEA research report on arts and achievement in at-risk youth found that teenagers and young adults of low socioeconomic status who have a history of in-depth arts involvement show better academic outcomes. They earn better grades, and they have higher rates of college enrollment and attainment. They have higher career goals, and they are more civically and civilly engaged. Young adults who have had intensive arts experience in high school are more likely to show civic-minded behavior with comparatively high levels of volunteering, voting, and engagement with local or school politics. According to the NEA Education Association, facilitated learning experiences with works of art cultivate global perspectives and an appreciation of the diversity of cultures, ideas, and human experiences. The study of works of art promotes the development of creative and critical thinking skills that are important to success in life as well as in school. These include inquiry, analysis, and interpretation, as well as flexibility, imagination, and reflection. For all of these reasons, the Getty works in close partnership with the LA Unified School District to provide the experiences at the Getty and in the classroom, particularly for students in Title I schools. The importance of art as a critical element in the creation of a civil society will not diminish. Indeed, it will not diminish with the introduction of digital technology. Its importance will only increase as access to the visual arts and the history of art become widespread on a global basis. The Getty is playing a role in this effort as well, having recently launched a global digital portal to provide scholars, researchers, and the general public eventual access to all books of art history published prior to 1923, and in 1923 because of the copyright law, and in the leading museum and university libraries in Europe and North America, and soon enough this will be expanded to libraries in South America and Asia as well. At the same time, we are constantly populating our website with new information about works of art in our museum's collections, as well as the latest discoveries of our conservation scientists and new and increasingly enriched curricular materials and study aids for teachers anywhere in the world. A recent digital project in the service of our colleagues in the Middle East who are charged with the protection of and research into the world's archaeological heritage within their national borders, something called Middle Eastern Geodatabase for Antiquities, otherwise called MEGA, but we didn't want to proceed with the idea of MEGA as if that was some sort of self-identifier of our ambition. So Middle Eastern Geodatabase for Antiquities in Jordan, it is a bilingual Arabic-English web-based National Geographic information system for Jordan's Department of Antiquities that will serve as the primary tool for the Department of Antiquities in its ongoing work to inventory, monitor, and manage Jordan's vast number of archaeological sites. Launched in partnership with the World's Monuments Fund, MEGA software is low-cost, open-source, non-proprietary, and has wide compatibility with similar systems of Jordanian national and local authorities. To date, its success is such that the site is richly populated with information, photographic and verbally descriptive information, entered by our Jordanian colleagues according to their needs and interests, and it is beginning to be adopted by Iraq and other antiquities authorities in the region. We are currently expanding the basic premise of MEGA to the larger universe of all manner of post-archaeological immovable heritage, including buildings and other structures, cultural landscapes, heritage ensembles, and districts around the world. Called Arches, a system supporting heritage inventory and management tool, the project is still in the development, and like MEGA, will employ open source software and open data encoding standards, and will be populated by its users to their needs and interests. Let me return to and then conclude by bringing us back to the basics, the foundation of civility. The foundation of civility as experienced in art museums. Civility requires that we seek to understand the concerns of others, as mentioned by the mayor, that we learn to respect that others have views and experiences different from our own. To achieve this, we need to put ourselves aside for the moment, our personal interests and preoccupations. Excuse me, but I've been traveling on multiple continents the last few days, and I have a small cold that one gets, as one tends to on airplanes. The 19th century poet and critic Matthew Arnold described literary criticism as the effort, in his words, to see the object as in itself it really is. The mid-20th century literary critic Lionel Trilling concurred. He wrote, "The object, whether it be a phenomenon of nature, or a work of art, or an idea, or a system of ideas, or a social problem, or indeed a person, is not to be seen as it, or he or she appears to our habitual thought, to our predilections and prejudices, to our casual or hasty inspection, but as it really is in itself, in its own terms, in these alone. Objectivity, we might say," he said, "is the respect we give to the object as it exists apart from us." Well, this is what the the Enlightenment founders of the Encyclopedic Museum meant by rigorous scientific analysis. To suspect all received opinion and unverifiable truths, and instead to subject them, and the data on which they are based, to critique, as in themselves they really are, and then to critique one's conclusions on the same terms. To do this, as Trilling reminded us, we have to respect the object, in the case of art museums, the work of art, as it exists apart from us, as the thing there before us, that is not us, and that does not conform to our habitual thought or predilections, but that preceded our seeing it, that existed apart from us, and that requires our putting ourselves aside to come to grips with it and all of its stubborn matter-of-factness, as in itself it really is. The 20th century French mystical philosopher Simone Weil wrote of this on similar terms. "At the moment we see something beautiful," she wrote, "we, in her terms, give up our imaginary position at the center. A transformation then takes place at the very roots of our sensibility, in our immediate reception of sense impressions and psychological impressions. And we experience then the moral benefits of stepping aside in favor of something else, of acknowledging that something exists on terms that we have to come to grips with ourselves, to understand and appreciate it as it is different from us." The English moral philosopher Iris Murdoch wrote of this moment that anything which alters consciousness in the direction of unselfishness, objectivity, and realism is to be connected with virtue. So to experience beauty, therefore, and this is the principal experience that one can have in art museums and in encyclopedic art museums, to experience different kinds of beauties in a variety of different and unfamiliar works of art from different times and places, is to experiencing an unselfing of a kind. And all the energy that one formerly put into the service of protecting, guarding, and advancing the self is then free to be put in the service of another. First another thing, and then another person. This is the promise of encyclopedic museums, and why they matter now more than ever. They elicit an objective response in us, encouraging us to set aside ourselves to see the works of ourselves aside to see the works of others as in themselves they really are, and then to realize that in this they are like us, and the objects with which we most easily identify. And then, as the philosopher Paul Ricoeur has written, when we discover that there are several cultures instead of just one, and consequently at the time when we acknowledge the end of a sort of cultural monopoly, be it illusory or real, we are threatened with destruction by our own discovery. Suddenly it becomes possible that there are just others, that we ourselves are an other among others. And this, I think, is the basis of civility, the respect for the other, and then others with others in a common pursuit of understanding. And it is why I hold that art museums and cosmopolite cultural institutions like the J. Paul Getty Trust play a vital role in developing and strengthening civil society, and why they matter today, now perhaps more than ever. So thank you. That was a presentation, but I wanted to engage you in conversation. I didn't want this to just be a lecture on my part. I think we have 15 minutes or so, do we? Yes, Mayor? Yeah.
Dr. Cuno, thank you. I cannot have pictured.
Whoa.